For those of you who decide to go into corporations, or even if you're in a startup and you're talking to an investor or something else, there's something called the opportunity review. Most companies at one point will have everyone bring their ideas in, and they'll pick one. And so your preparation and understanding what an opportunity review is critical. Basically, I've been through 7 opportunity reviews, and I got funded all 7 times. So in terms of entrepreneurship, what are you going through? What parameters matter to business? They are risk averse. How are you going to handle risk? And I'll talk about the 6 industries that I've been in and how did they respond to it. Remember, it's still all about your basic story and journey is still about care, believe, and join. And so I'm just going to race through this because you've seen it a lot of times before. Your audience, do you understand who you're pitching to? Whether it's VCs or angels. Okay, little refresher. For an angel, what is the most important thing that you're shooting for? Connection. Correct. And that's that they're looking at this less as a return and more about forming a relationship with someone. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, so we're talking about companies. What interleaves together is, first of all, how do they make their decisions? Who's involved? Can you make a good business case? How are you going to get growth and get on the beach? And also, what are our internal channels of doing this? And what kind of competition are you faced with? These are the key things in entrepreneurship, which is meaning how companies internally make product decisions. In terms of decision making, what are the constraints? The way to think about it, who you should talk to. Remember, a company sits on 3 pillars, and actually a pedestal of finance, which touches everything. But marketing, product, and strategy. Strategy you can think of as management. Who are you going to have to deal with that regarding those 2s? In terms of the business case, the market, the gaps, the opportunities, risk. What are these things that make up the landscape? What internal roadblocks you have? For example, maybe you have cultural issues that you have to deal with, and that's that you might have a very risk-averse organization, and you're talking about pie in the sky stuff. How are they structured, and what kind of budget can you have? And once you launch, how quickly can you go? How quickly are you going to get on the beach? In terms of constraints, market, what's the size? How will this market receive new technology? Is it a market that's progressive, or is it a market that's very conservative? Competition, what kind of customer intimacy can you build? In terms of product, it's about the cost, the process that you have to go through to create that product. Are we capable? And it's always about risk. And so strategy is about finance. Do we need additional people? I have to think about long-term, short-term. How is this going to impact us? And so examples of constraints. For example, in the market, if you're doing implants, you're talking about a fairly long period of time because there's a lot of regulatory you have to go through. In terms of markets, what you're facing, Samsung and Apple, how are you going to handle that? In terms of product, Iridium, which was Motorola's satellite system, which turned out to, they made a lot of bad decisions. But remember, it's not the one decision to go ahead and do it that kills the company. It's the 100 decisions after that to keep going. Blue Horizon, why are they so much slower than SpaceX? And it's because they're not willing to put down the huge chunk of change that Elon Musk is willing to do. And so in terms of strategy, obviously Tesla's having problems right now. Sears, thought that they were Sears, that they were vulnerable, and they're not. And they thought they were about just brick and mortar stores when they could have been so much more. And also, who's going to be investing in this thing? Historically, if you let investors take over your company, they typically will not reinvest in the company. What they're going to do is leech the company until it finally goes under. And that's what happened to Hostess and a host of other companies. In terms of budget, your financials, which is about your three kinds of financial statements. Income, how much are we going to make? Balance sheet, how many assets do we have that are involved in this? And cash flow, well, from day to day or month to month, do we have the cash to cover everything we're going to have? And that's actually really important because Macy's actually turned a profit one year and then went bankrupt. And the reason why is because they didn't manage the cash flow, that all the money was basically pushed forward and back-ended, that they didn't have the short-term cash, so they had to take out loans and things like that. What are your commitments? And finally, same thing, what is your strategy? Examples of budget. Tesla, $7 billion. Even though they net $7 billion, the revenue is $29 billion, and yet they have $13 billion in debt. Why don't they just try to pay all the debt off? And in certain cases, it's good to have debt. And why it's good to have debt is because you don't want to use all your cash up. And also, this is predictable enough that I know that, okay, I'm paying 6% interest, but I'm going to make 10% off this. So you know it's going to be net positive. And here are some other examples of other companies. IBM's carrying a lot of debt right now. Microsoft, which is really flush on cash, is carrying $67 billion in debt. In terms of commitments, for example, the Starliner or Artemis were products that companies had commitments to, and they take years, and so you can't get around that. In terms of strategy, biomedical, for example, is an acquisition business. When you see established companies, they do very, very little internally except for line extensions. Like, for example, J&J makes Advil. And so now all of a sudden you have Advil PM, which means there might have been a little caffeine in your Tylenol, so they took it out so you could sleep better at night, those sort of things. Automotive is a really brutal business. I did not enjoy working with those people. And the reason why is, when you look at an automobile, it's amazing for the number of parts and everything, how much you actually pay for a car. You're really getting a bargain. But part of it is they put a lot of cost pressures on their vendors. And so that's a tough business to be in. Finances. Typically, finances are driven by three things. How much are we talking about? How much time there is regarding this cash flow, and what rate am I either paying or getting a return? All three play off of each other. Some examples. Broadcast.com. They have $50 million in revenue and were barely turning a profit, and yet they were purchased for $5.7 billion. And because they thought this is the future of the internet, streaming radio, and they thought there were other applications they could go for it. And subsequently, within 3 years, Yahoo, who bought the company, was out. Who was the one who cashed in on this? Mark Cuban. And he freely admits, he said, I couldn't become a billionaire under normal circumstances. It was the dot-com boom. Examples of financial commitments. Light beer from Miller. They were willing to lose money 5 years just to get market share because this was a whole new market of light beer. Lenovo buys the IBM PC division, and it's because Lenovo wanted to become, a legitimate computer company. And so, subsequently, That 1.75 is now 15 billion today, and they're growing at 9.3%. When you're a business, you're always trying to be the best at something. And so there are three things you can excel at. You can have the best product out there, you can have the best price, or you can know the customer better than anyone else. An example of this is like GoPro. GoPro is not the best camera, it's not the best price, but the reason why GoPro took off is because they understood the extreme sports star, and that was their first audience to get onto the beachhead with them. Biases. When you have to talk to a company, companies and their culture and their decision makings are biased. And so there are those who are mostly interested in what's the most amount of return for the least amount of headache. And so this is why companies like Goodrich and Velcro are fairly conservative, because that's their culture. I want to own the future. I want to dominate it. And so companies like Meta and the Big Seven are like that. Or maybe I'm just fine just making somebody happy. That being number two is okay. And that's where you see GE and HP and companies like that. GE once had a mandate. They had to be number one or number two in every market. And now they're just so cash strapped and all, they can't afford to turn down anything that's going to give them cash. Cash is king. When you think about a business opportunity and you're thinking about a business case in a review, what's my capability as a company? What competition am I going to get? How much is it going to cost me going up against them? What kind of payoff am I going to be looking at? And whatever I do, is it defendable? Meaning, I can hold off competition around this. And so all these things you need to think about when you're making your business case. Now, when we look at markets, we need to look at the landscape, essentially what's going on. And these are called the 5 C's. And collaborate, who can I work with? What can I do? You have to understand yourself as a company. It makes me think of that Clint Eastwood movie when he kept saying, a man's got to know his limitations. Who is your customer? Who's your competitor? And what's the climate, meaning what's the context? What's going on in the world around that? What's the nature of the market? And so, is it equilibrium where everybody has their piece and it's just going to be hard to dislodge anyone? Is it volatile? But it's unstable, but there might be opportunity there. Or is it stagnant? Meaning, for some reason, these markets don't change, whether it's due to legal or technology or whatever. But market volatility is a very big consideration when you're making products. In terms of opportunity considerations, if I create something, it means I'm going to have to destroy something. And destroying something, you're going to find opposition. Are we expanding, or do we need to defend what we have? Do we further entrench? We stay where we are, but we make ourselves even stronger? Or is a market exploding and we can just free ride? Who's free riding right now? AI companies. And that's why a lot of people are investing in it. It's the gold. They're what I call gold rush markets. And I've seen it many times before. And what always happens with the gold rush markets, whether they're Dutch tulips, railroads, the internet, eventually they crash. They're a bubble. So in terms of business case, another thing you have to think about is, what are the market gaps? Meaning, what's the distance between me and the customer? And are you creating something that has an unmet need? And this is about working with the customer and how well you know the customer. For entrepreneurs, one thing you need to do once you get your product out there is embed yourself with the customer. How well do you really know them? Do you know how they use your product? at 9 a.m. versus 5 p.m.? Does it change? That's how well you really need to know your customers. And be better. You know what your competition is. You know what the benchmark is. How can you be better? And an example is like Hyundai versus Tesla. One thing about the Hyundai Ioniq, and that's that it's been, and I actually drove it. I actually liked it quite a bit because it was a car that was designed for drivers. Whereas Tesla, when I drove a Tesla, I felt like I was driving more like a piece of technology. And so in terms of investment, is this short-term, mid-term, or long-term? If I'm short-term, it means I want a boost in sales. If it's mid-term, it means I'm developing new markets. And if it's long-term, it means I'm trying to find new customers. Because creating relationships with new customers takes time. And I'm also looking to invest in franchises, meaning something that has the potential to create a family of products. In terms of competition, I want to know what their profile is, who they're going up against, and that's these factors. How are they going to respond to me? What's their typical base responses? In certain cases, it's very direct, like airlines. Somebody raises their prices, someone else raises it. Are you a copycat? Is about being the second mover? Maybe you're indirect. And so you make parts. You don't actually, like the Dodge brothers. Before they made cars, they made parts. They wanted to make cars, but they had to wait to get in. In terms of expansion, are you an acquisition business? Do you work internally with tech? And so in terms of competition, you could have competition and an opportunity review within your own company, that you're competing against other people who also have their ideas. And so do you understand them? Most opportunity reviews are decided before the opportunity review ever takes place. They're always worried about risk. And what is risk? There are different kinds of risk. So risk is the probability that something bad might happen multiplied by the impact. Like, for example, every drug on the planet can kill you. There's a 1 in 2 million chance of it happening, but it can kill you. And that's why a lot of people who talk about vaccines and stuff, a lot of this is really disingenuous. Not only that, I've worked in the medical field. One of the most toughest things about data sets is if nobody is perfectly healthy, you always have something else that's going on. And so maybe somebody, they say, died from a heart drug, but maybe they had kidney problems or something like that. But anyway, the risk areas you're concerned with and they're concerned about with is technology, does it work? Finance, how big a return am I going to get for my investment? Is it reliable? And that's something that entrepreneurs don't talk about, is that you have to think about reliability. Liability. Things go wrong. Who's going to have to pay for it? Programmatic, which is a project management. Can you pull this off? Is this going to go smoothly? And also the market. Does the market want you? Now, at an internal review, when you're developing products, you could have internal roadblocks. And that's what is the decision making in terms of engineering to get support for you to pull it off. Are you a matrix organization where you need to go to other people to get it? Or if you get approval, will you have the resources right there and be able to select and put a team together? In engineering, they're concerned about priority and visibility. And so, are you important enough to them? And finally, of course, there's a financial element. And that's that you may not have the budget. You may not have the cost. Example of that is universities right now. It's not just ASU, it's everybody. Everybody's tightening the belt because the government is getting out of the university business. So they have to start thinking about where are they going to get support in the future. In order to execute an idea, you have to get buy-in from the stakeholders. And so you need to know who those people are. Maybe you have a soft start, and that's that you have certain customers that people respect. And they're called lighthouse customers because they're going to show the way and what you're going to have to do. Or maybe you have pilot programs. You just don't do a full launch right away. There are trade-offs, meaning do we use a lean approach or do we do a full release? And finally, tactical in terms of executing. How good is your problem solving? It's kind of amusing. Over the summer, someone called me up for a job, and I was there like, I'm 10 years out of the game. Why would you want me? And he said, because I've heard stories about you from my dad. Yeah, this was actually a classmate's son, which I'm really starting to date myself. But anyway, he said, you problem solve more efficiently than anybody I've ever seen. And efficiency is not only about using minimal resources, it's about keeping the costs down. That, like, for every mile that you have to go, I use less money. And the process I use to be able to do that is called the groove. When you get to TEM102, you'll learn how to groove. You know, that state of mind where everything goes smoothly and quickly, you get in a groove. Scaling. In terms of go-to-market, what is the right launch model? Is it going to be soft? Is it going to be full release? Distribution, you have to think about. Post-launch, how are you going to measure success? And intra versus entrepreneurship. One of the big differences is that in entrepreneurship, you have a friendly banker. Entrepreneurship, you're counting on the kindness of others. Now, one thing you're concerned about, and you have to address in these opportunity reviews, is obsolescence. You try to forecast how the market is going to change and how quickly, because at some point you become obsolete, and therefore you need something new, or the competition is going to jump in ahead of you. On the other hand, if you're wrong, there's catastrophe. Motorola thought that their Razr could last a lot longer and that digital phones will come in later. And in reality, what happened is they didn't see the emergence of both Samsung and Apple. And all of a sudden, that long lifetime they were predicting for the Razr didn't take place because these two basically siphoned them off. And so it was actually much more than the digital phone that put the fork into Motorola. Is it better to be a year early or better to be a year late? You have to constantly be innovating. What is your philosophy? For example, the philosophy of Apple is we will not necessarily be the first to market, but we will always be the best to market. And so things like cell phones and even smartwatches, Apple came later. But on the other hand, they dominate those markets right now. Competition matters. And an example is in 2008. Now, what a stent is they don't do open heart surgery anymore. If they see an occlusion, what they do is they put down, think about a wire fence, teeny tiny, shaped like a tube, and they put it into where the occlusion is, and they use a balloon to blow it up to basically crush and squash the occlusion, but also to open up the vessel so it won't collapse again. And then all of a sudden, when you see 2011, Boston Scientific and J&J own the market. Now all of a sudden, that market got cut up, and also J&J got killed. They ended up leaving the market because Boston Scientific, Abbott Labs, and Medtronic all did it better. And so, again, is it better to be a year early or a year late? Maybe it's about being best to market. And that's what ended up happening with these other companies. There are 4 skills that you need if you're going to win opportunity reviews, but also to develop products. Your storytelling. Is your decision-making data-driven? Can you form networks? You have to network across your company. If nobody knows you, you cannot win. I went into an opportunity review and I got crushed. And afterwards, the vice president was very nice to me. He came up to me and he just said, "Steve, you actually presented the better product." And he said, "You have lower cost, huge market, and also you address the customer's needs." He said, "The reason why you lost is you didn't have enough friends in the room." And so networking is very important. And finally, with risk, one of the hardest things to do with risk is, you slow down when you're trying to avoid risk. But the question is, how can I go faster and still be able to manage that risk? Because the two are counter to each other. So how do you handle that? So in terms of skills, storytelling is this class. And so you know about why we have storytelling and what are the key things, because it helps build our entrepreneurial network. In terms of networking, map out who you need in your network. Use the 3 pillars as a guide. Research. Find out who has influence in your company. When you contact people, how can I be personable? How can I be genuine? For example, recently I sent out an email to my fellow professors telling them about what the initiative in the future of education is going to be for our department in AI. And so I could have just jumped into it right away. This is what Fulton wants us to do in terms of the future of this department. Instead, what I wrote is, right now a lot of people are saying that a college education doesn't matter anymore, that everybody should be going into the trades. And then I wrote, considering that I've been a busboy, a janitor, a grave digger, I've worked on the interstate, he said, "I'm all set. I already had the background and skills to flourish if this is all over for a college education." And I wrote, on the other hand, it's a knowledge world. Let's figure out what the future of knowledge is going to be. And so once again in storytelling, how do I draw people in and get them interested in what I'm saying? But what this also makes me is personable. I joke. And so that creates friendliness. The thing about networks are really, really hard. And it's because you can create a network and it takes a ton of work. But then if you abandon your network, the whole thing will collapse. You have to keep priming it. You have to keep talking to people. The only value in a network is if it's active. Who are contacts that you can have? Here's a whole list of it. The worst is, cold calling. And so this is what LinkedIn's great for, that when you start talking to people, you keep connecting, and eventually you do really connect with the people that you need to talk to. So what is being this personable thing? Are you engaging? Are you pleasant? And so you have to figure out what drives people. Research. The thing is, information is unsupervised and supervised. Unsupervised means I just take the data that's out there and see what it tells me. And supervised means I run some kind of experiment and then look at the data and see what it's telling me. Watch others to learn. That's the whole thing about storytelling that I've been telling you about. Writers all steal from each other. Again, I was born to poor but noble parents. I stole from Peter Schunemann. I think Schunemann stole it from the Greeks, but anyway, learn how to edit. And a lot of you have word economy problems. And And so the only way to get past that is keep editing. And one of the best ways to learn how to edit is actually on your resume, because most resumes are too long. And so it really forces you to cut things down and to contract. In terms of small talk, this is another way you engage people. One reason why you can connect with others is something called homophily. And that's that if we share something, then we have the potential to influence each other. So if you need to make small talk with people, find neutral topics like weather, TV, sports to a certain degree, food, work. One question that nobody gets upset about and actually makes you look like you're interested in them is asking people, where do you come from? Complimenting people. Also, maybe you just talk about little things, or maybe you talk about larger things. Zoom in and out. Be agile. Form around the person around you. The more you learn about them, that sets the direction you should go in. And if you're not natural as a personable person, which is me, it took me years, but you have to learn how. And one thing that's really difficult is if you're introverted. I'm an introvert. And what introversion actually means is that in order for you to talk to and engage people, it takes energy out of you to do it. The thing about extroverts is this interaction, they thrive on it. They love where the energy of others. A good example of it is an extrovert is Professor Chavez. Professor Chavez loves being in front of a group. He loves talking to people, and he feels the energy and he feeds off of it. I, on the other hand, really couldn't care less. And that's why later on, it's like after dealing with a lot of people, I need to be left alone. I need to get back into my own head. And one way to make it easier to be more extroverted is tell stories. Here's the whole thing. If you want to get it better at anything, you have to put your head on a platter. And what that means is you have to make the assumption that I do not know everything, and therefore I'm going to listen and learn from others. And who did I learn that from? Shiling Su, who is actually the best chess player in my high school. Well, it was either him or Avo Karmas. But anyway, Shiling, because I was just starting out playing chess, and he told me, look, if you want to get better, this is what you have to do. And what he was also basically telling me is that defeat is humbling, but you have to accept that in order to go on. Now, this is what I call the big six, and these are the 6 industries I worked in. Semiconductor, defense, and automotive are 3 of them. What these tables are, and I won't go through these. I actually go through these in my entrepreneurship class. But semiconductor, the largest manufacturing business in the history of mankind. Never before could we make $1 billion of something. The thing about the defense industry is that a lot of, and this is why I believe in defense research, because a lot of it spins off into commercial space. Cars are actually a 27-degree differential equation. One small part failure could take the entire thing down. And so there's intense competition. What does it come down to? What defines the business? Basically, semi is a volume cost business. Defense is about reliability and uniqueness. Automotive, it's all about price and redundancy. Meaning, if you just have one factory, they will not buy for you. Because if that factory goes down, then they're screwed. So, they count on that. And so, what causes their decision making? Semiconductor is very much market driven. Defense, through the government, automotive through functional franchises. And so, what are their constraints? What kind of money do they spend? What is the climate that they have to deal with? Basically, the context. What engineering capacity do they need to pull it off? And also, what are they trying to do between earning a profit short term and getting growth long term? And what kind of time horizon for projects are they looking for you to eventually pay off for them? Here are some more of things that we talked about in the presentation. So the business case. What are the how do they handle these things? What internal roadblocks do they have? Every company has internal roadblocks. How do they launch? And how do they diffuse? And so, gaining support for an opportunity to review is a game. And so you need to understand what that game is. This is why I've been able to be successful in so many different industries. None of them are alike. But when I went in, I said, this is a game. I just need to figure out what the rules of the game are, and I can win. And so what are those factors that a game revolves around? Who are the players? What moves are permissible? What's the payoffs? What order takes place? How much can I wager? Life is not chess. Life is like poker. The thing is, every industry has its own set of rules. They can be similar, but they're also different. So those details matter. And if you're out on the outside, find somebody who's on the inside who could tell you how this works. And that's why you look for people who work inside these industries. And how can you be effective? Well, you have to understand the business, negotiating, networking, and all these keys are critical. And in particular, this is why storytelling can be so powerful in your ability to be successful during these reviews.